And for the next half an hour, I will be reading from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. First article, Wealth is Exiting New York, including Buffalo. More higher wage earners and other people of means are leaving the state than are moving here. The Sun Belt is cashing in, also pockets of the Northeast and Midwest. Article is by Jim Heaney. There is a lot of depressing statistics about Western New York and its economy. Our job growth is stagnant and our population is shrinking. I came across a most distressing statistic in the current issue of Business First based on IRS data. We, as a region, are growing poorer in part because of population loss, although that's not necessarily the only factor. The adjusted gross income of people who moved out of metropolitan Buffalo in 2022 and 2023 was $311 million greater than that of those who moved in. It reflects a loss of some 3,500 people. Wealth is fleeing New York across the state. More money left than moved into Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, New York City, even Long Island, according to the data. As Business First put it, billions of dollars in earning power has been on the move, and suburban Sunbelt counties and high-growth metro areas are once again the big winners. The South became a domestic migration powerhouse in the aftermath of the pandemic. Counties in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas topped census migration rankings, with larger cities often attracting 30,000 or more new residents annually. At the other end of the spectrum are some of the nation's largest metro areas: New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Chicago, and San Francisco, which rank at the bottom for net migration between 2022 and 2023. All of these cities had net migration declines of at least 39,000 individuals over the 12-month period. Those declines don't just represent lost population, they also represent lost wealth and earnings. Not that pockets of the North and Midwest are not gaining. Our neighbors in Vermont and New Hampshire are in the black. Ditto for pockets of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Maine, but not here in New York, upstate, or downstate. There is a link, although it's behind a paid subscription and out of reach for those of you who do not subscribe to Business First. However, it includes a very telling map and is worth checking out. And our next Investigative Post article, Buffalo Landlords' Problem Properties. Andre Foster's track record as property owner includes numerous building code violations and 9/11 calls and unpaid taxes and user fees. Authorities haven't done much to rein him in. Article is by Adam Smith Perez. In March, Buffalo police shot and killed a knife-wielding mentally ill man living in an unlicensed boarding house in a makeshift bedroom city inspectors deemed unfit for human occupancy. Andre Foster, the property owner, has 12 rental properties in Buffalo, including the shooting scene at 54 Minnesota Avenue. Many of his apartments are a danger to tenants, according to interviews with them and public records. Foster's tenants have endured rodent infestations, broken windows, lead paint, and in at least one case, raw sewage. One former tenant reported living without electricity for weeks. 6 of the properties have outstanding code violations, 53 of them active, but Foster has never been fined in housing court. He owes the city $44,616 in unpaid trash collection fees and $17,927 in property taxes to the city in Erie County. Some of those unpaid tax bills date back 5 years, yet the city has never foreclosed on his tax delinquent properties. The county is in the process of foreclosing on one. The properties frequently have been the subject of 911 calls, some 175 since 2020, assaults, thefts, ambulances. One current tenant who requested anonymity for fear of retaliation blamed the city for letting Foster's properties languish. If the city put the hammer down on people, landlords would be scared to treat tenants the way they do, he said. Landlords' problem properties. All but one of Andre Foster's 13 properties have an issue of one sort or another, and there are listed all 13 properties. 357 Leroy Avenue has 15 code violations. 30 Minnesota Avenue has 18 code violations. 32 Minnesota Avenue, 8. 46 Minnesota Avenue, 18. 54 Minnesota Avenue, 28. 11 Dartmouth has 9 code violations. 17 Heath Street, 37 code violations. 586 Maston, 591 Maston Avenue, 48 Lisbon, 46 Winslow Avenue, 768 Columbus Parkway, 511 Genesee Street, 513 Genesee Street, all have some sort of code violations. 911 calls, unpaid city taxes, unpaid county taxes, and unpaid user fees. 3 of Foster's properties were in housing court last week for code violations. One case was dismissed. The judge granted him more time to address citations on the other 2. Meanwhile, Foster continues to operate at least one boarding house without the required licenses and to neglect many of the other rental properties he owns. The ceiling collapsed at my barber shop because there were so many rats in the ceiling. Durin Lynch, a former tenant, told Investigative Post it took Foster 4 months to respond to me. Alicia St. Germain was a student at DeAuville University when she rented a $425 room from Foster on the West Side in 2014. She said Foster exploited her and her fellow housemates' desperation and completely avoided the property when they called to report problems. Even though they were included in her rent, St. Germain said she fielded calls from bill collectors after Foster failed to pay utilities, leaving the building without power for weeks. On March 5th at 54 Minnesota Avenue, 58-year-old Charles Butler held his housemates at knife point. According to police records, Butler was shot and killed by police in a bedroom city inspectors said was illegally carved out of the living room. Foster refused to answer questions about his properties and hung up on an Investigative Post reporter shortly after he was asked about conditions and the incident at 54 Minnesota. I'm not at liberty to even discuss that with you, but I'm sure the detective who's on the case could tell you anything you want to know about it, Foster said. Rats and raw sewage. Andre Foster is a self-employed real estate professional, according to his Facebook page. County records indicate that he began purchasing properties in the University Heights neighborhood in 2001. Foster's properties are 1 and 2 family homes. 7 are in University Heights, 4 on the east side, and 1 on the lower west side. Investigative Post reviewed 5 years of police complaints and records, 21 city inspection reports, and more than city court cases involving landlord-tenant disputes, small claims, cases, and code violations involving Foster since 2011. We also interviewed more than a dozen people, including current and former tenants, neighbors, city officials, housing advocates, police experts, and members of 2 block clubs with knowledge of events that have occurred at and around Foster's properties. Current tenants spoke on the condition of anonymity, fearing retaliation. For 5 years, Durin Lynch ran his barber shop, Fade Gods, out of a ground-level commercial space he rented from Foster at 511 Genesee Street. Lynch said he initially felt Foster was a fair landlord, allowing the barber to deduct from his rent costs he incurred making repairs to the property himself. But then Lynch encountered a problem that just kept getting worse. Electricity would go out and he'd hear rustling in the walls. He realized the building had a rat infestation and that they'd been chewing on wires and burrowing in the walls. Then one afternoon, Lynch's ceiling collapsed. Hordes of rats fell from a giant hole into the shop. Have you ever seen Fear Factor? I'm not going to say hundreds, but it was a lot, Lynch said. A Fear Factor type of a lot. Lynch said he had to temporarily close his business and estimated spending $15,000 for extermination and renovations. Lynch said Foster did not respond even after he sent him photos and videos of the ceiling for 4 months. There was also a beyond horrible smell coming from the back of the house, Lynch said. Eventually, a pipe burst and raw sewage began flowing into the backyard. He never responded, never called back, never nothing, said Lynch. I told him I'm not paying the rent for a couple of months. In March 2025, Foster attempted to collect $10,000 from Lynch in housing court for unpaid rent and damaged appliances, according to city records. I moved. I said, screw you, I'm not paying you rent because you haven't taken care of the property, Lynch said. You haven't done anything. I haven't seen you in 2 years. For 511 Genesee, Foster owes $7,493 in garbage collection fees and $1,549 in city and sewer taxes. He hasn't paid county taxes on the property, now totaling $2,012 since 2022. Death in an illegal boarding house. Foster purchased 54 Minnesota Avenue, a single-family 4-bedroom home in November 2004, according to county records. In April, 1 month after Butler was shot and killed there, city inspectors determined that Foster was operating an unlicensed boarding house at the property. By definition, a boarding house, referred to as a lodging house in Buffalo, accommodates 3 or more people for a fee with sleeping privileges. Applicants for lodging house licenses go through a rigorous vetting process. It includes proving residency in the city, having one's moral character assessed, and submitting the criminal history associated with the property for review. The last step is obtaining approval from the Common Council. City inspectors in July 2025 cited Foster for renting out the home as a 5-bedroom after they said he illegally carved an extra bedroom out of the first floor living room. According to police video footage, it's where Butler, who had a criminal record and history of mental illness, was shot and later died. Even before the shooting, 54 Minnesota was a problem property. Since 2020, there have been at least 20 ambulance visits, 2 thefts, a burglary, 2 assaults, 2 suicide-related calls, and 3 welfare checks at that address, according to the records of 9/11 calls obtained in March of this year. It is unclear when Foster began renting out the house room by room, but in a 9/11 call on the night of March 5th, Foster told officers that tenants were living at the property in separate locked rooms. There is more to this story, and if you want, you can call 716-821-5555 if you would want to hear the rest of this article. Our staff will be glad to read it to you. And our next article is Wojtaszek versus Brown. OTB in turmoil yet again. Article by J. Dale Shoemaker. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The return of Henry Watasek to the Western Regional Off-Track Betting Corp has thrown the gambling agency into turmoil, pitting the former CEO against his successor, Byron Brown. OTB insiders told Investigative Post they believe Watasek is waging a stealth campaign to reassert his influence over the organization. Watasek, one source said, is on his revenge tour. The latest manifestation of Watasek's campaign appears to be a lawsuit filed against OTB by a former bar manager who claims he was wrongfully terminated. The lawsuit alleges that the staff of OTB has split into two camps since Brown took over in late 2024, those allied with the former Buffalo mayor and those allied with Watasek. David Hewson, a 21-year veteran of OTB, claims he was fired from his part-time bar manager gig because Batavia Downs has become factionalized. Hewson had never previously experienced the same type of hostility, factionalism, exclusion, and retaliation that occurred under the management structure involving Chief of Staff Stephen Casey and Mr. Brown, the lawsuit claims. The lawsuit is just the latest in a series of controversies that has broiled since last summer. In that time, Brown and his Chief of Staff Stephen Casey released a report that blamed a senior official who turned out to be Chief Operating Officer Scott Kudrowski, a longtime friend and ally of Watasek, for helping himself and his friends to $27,000 worth of food and drinks from the bars and restaurants at Batavia Downs. Watasek, former chairman of the Niagara County Republican Party, was appointed to the OTB board by the GOP-controlled county legislature in September. Also, what has happened since last summer, a group of longtime female employees wrote a letter to the board of directors urging them to stop Watasek from returning. Watasek's wife, a Niagara County judge, then berated one of the women at a public event at Batavia Downs. The State Commission on Judicial Conduct is investigating, sources said, and State Controller Thomas DiNapoli released a critical audit that found Watasek and the board of directors mismanaged OTB's finances over a period of 4 years. Now comes Hewson's lawsuit, which blames Brown and Casey for playing favorites and unfairly targeting employees they believe are allied with Watasek. For losing his job under such conditions, Hewson is seeking $15 million in damages. His lawsuit states he earns between $30,000 and $35,000 annually. Salary records show he was paid $22.16 per hour in 2025. 9 sources, most speaking on background, told Investigative Post that tensions have risen within the organization since Watasek returned to the board. Watasek's return, one source said, has caused a lot of angst and that staff themselves don't know who to listen to. Another source, a longtime employee who declined to speak on record for fear of retaliation, put it this way: Henry Watasek is the puppet master, they said. He's got all his little minions that he promoted and put in different departments, and now he's pulling the puppet strings, and they're doing exactly what he's saying to create problems for current management. Hewson's lawyer, John Bartolome of Niagara Falls, denied that Watasek had any connection to the lawsuit, saying, "The pleadings speak for themselves. Between 2018 and 2020, state records show Bartolomea donated $2,250 to political campaign accounts of Caroline Watasek, the county judge, and Henry Watasek's wife." Henry Watasek did not return a request for comment for this story. Complicating matters is that Watasek lacks a state gaming license, a requirement to serve on OTB's board. In an April 6 letter obtained by Investigative Post, Robert Williams, executive director of the State Gaming Commission, admonished OTB leadership for allowing Watasek to participate in board meetings as a non-voting member without a license. Even if he wasn't voting, the appearance of Watasek's name in meeting minutes and on OTB's website, Williams wrote, could make the public think he was a full board member. This is inaccurate and misleading to the public, Williams wrote. Unless and until qualified by the commission, Mr. Wojtasek cannot lawfully participate as a member of the Western Board. At the same time, Senator Jeremy Zellner has introduced a bill that would prevent Wojtasek from obtaining a gaming license at all. He argues the former CEO mismanaged the corporation, which is legally mandated to send its profits to New York State and the 17 municipalities that control it. The fact is that Mr. Wojtasek should not be anywhere near OTB right now, Zellner told Investigative Post. At stake in all of the controversy, control of OTB's hotel, casino, racetrack, and betting parlors, which gross around $1 billion each year and are known as political patronage operations. What the lawsuit alleges. Hewson, according to his lawsuit, worked for OTB for 21 years before retiring in 2023. Sources said he accepted a generous early retirement bonus when he left. His lawsuit says he was hired back part-time 2 months later. Hewson's litigation makes a number of claims, most aimed at Casey, Brown's right-hand man and a longtime ally and confidant. Among them, Casey attempted to pit employees against one another, including by spreading rumors that one employee hated another. The lawsuit provides few additional details. Casey complained to a food and beverage manager that he hated the bartenders at Batavia Downs main bar, 34 Rush, and wanted to shut it down. Hewson, on one occasion, pushed a bar cart into a room where Casey questioned Hewson as to whether the cart was bugged. Casey's mismanagement caused the corporation to lose $150,000 to $200,000 in sponsorship revenue during the 2025 summer concert series. The lawsuit provides no additional details. Prior to the lawsuit, Brown, in a statement, noted that the concert series last year made a profit for the first time, netting $272,321. Casey inappropriately sprayed a female employee with water during an active shooter training. The woman, Human Resources Director Danielle Fleming, was associated with prior leadership and or treated as part of the disfavored group, the lawsuit claims. Sources said the incident occurred in June 2025 and that Hewson was not present to witness it. Hewson's lawsuit goes on to allege that he and another employee, bartender Kara Long, filed whistleblower complaints with the board of directors in January. The board subsequently engaged Rochester-based law firm Gallo and Iacovangelo. In March, after the law firm's report was completed, Hewson alleges Brown and Casey fired him in retaliation. His termination caused financial hardship, emotional distress, sleeplessness, embarrassment, and personal suffering, the suit alleges. He has been previously diagnosed with colon cancer and is currently suffering from leukemia. He alleges that the stress caused by Mr. Casey and Mr. Brown's workplace conduct and retaliatory termination aggravated his health conditions. In a statement, Brown said the claims in Hewson's lawsuit are false and that he was properly terminated. We look forward to vigorously defending our position, Brown said. Long declined to comment for this story. And the story does continue, and if you would like to get the complete story, you can call 716-821-5555, and our staff will be glad to read the rest of the story. And our next article from the Investigative Post, Bowerly's Family Feud continues. Article by Jeff Kelly. It's been 2 years since WBEN talk show host Tom Bowerly's brother and sister took him to court, claiming he cheated them of their share of their late mother's estate. The three siblings have come no closer to a resolution, recent court filings show. Rather, the dispute has only grown uglier and more acrimonious. Among the recent revelations documented in court papers, the radio personality's ex-wife described him as a master manipulator who tried to isolate his mother from his siblings as her health declined. She said she divorced him shortly after his mother's death, in part because of the way that he treated his family. Richard Bowerly described his brother as a looming presence in their mother's home, where Tom lived during the last 2 months of her life, even recording his show there. I was able to communicate with my mother only with Tom's permission and on Tom's terms, he said. Tom, meanwhile, described his siblings as vultures waiting to pick the bones, even as he took control of their mother's finances, took title to her house, transferred money from her accounts, and helped her to change her will to his benefit. Text messages between the siblings prior to her death indicate all three were concerned about preservation of her assets as her health declined. I wouldn't count on seeing a penny of that money, Tom texted his siblings, saying their mother would not want to live this way and faulting her for not making better end-of-life arrangements. Hospital workers reported that the day before her death in a hospice inpatient unit, Tom Bowerly expressed his wish for hospice staff to cause the patient to pass. They told him at least twice they don't do that, according to the report. He did not come to her bedside when she died the next day, telling a hospice worker that he was at peace with her passing and had a dental appointment he cannot miss. The dispute over Dorothy Bowerly's estate, worth close to $1 million, dates to May 2024, 2 months after the 90-year-old widow's death. That's when Richard Bowerly and Barbara Mantucci filed a lawsuit accusing their brother of convincing Dorothy through duress, undue influence, fraud, and exploitation of her infirmity to make himself her principal beneficiary. They said that prior to their brother's fraudulent and wrongful conduct, their mother intended the three siblings to share her estate equally. Instead, she changed her will 2 months before she died while in Tom's care to reduce their shares to 20% each, with the remaining 60% going to Tom. Investigative Post reported on the lawsuit shortly after it was filed in May 2024. Tom subsequently denied his siblings' claims and accused them of defamation, libel, and slander. Much of the legal action since then has aimed to establish how and when Tom consolidated control of his mother's affairs, the amount of money and property in dispute, and most especially whether Dorothy was of sound mind when she changed her will. Tom, through his lawyers, insists in court papers that she was. A judge 2 weeks ago ruled that the evidence submitted in recent months by both sides, including Tom's own descriptions of his mother's deteriorating condition, leaves room for doubt. Both sides of the dispute, through their attorneys, declined to comment. Old lady confused. Dorothy Bowerly in 2012 created a will that split her estate equally among her 3 children. At the same time, she signed her Tonawanda home over to the kids, also in equal shares. Throughout 2023, Dorothy's health declined. She was in and out of the hospital. Barbara and Richard were her primary caregivers, according to their court filings, transporting her to medical appointments, bringing her groceries, and checking on her welfare. Tom was not actively involved in the care of her mother during the summer of 2023, Barbara said in an affidavit. In December of that year, her physical and cognitive condition worsened. Richard, in an affidavit, said that she seemed generally disassociated from her surroundings. He said his mother seemed unaware on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day that it was the holidays. Tom seemed to agree their mother had lost a step. Old lady confused, he texted his sister on Christmas Day. He also joked that he was thinking about ways to bump off his siblings. And the article does continue, and if you would like, you can have the complete article read to you by our staff. Please call 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555.
Good morning. Welcome to another broadcast day in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, a private, not-for-profit organization. As always, please feel